All right, hello, my fellow risers. Um, so I want to yap about three things that kind of came to me. Uh, yeah, I think my eureka moment for all three was today, and this is about the value of recognition. Okay, so the not engaging with ajits and instead looking for susits, that's number one. Number two, the effective expectations, and number three, um, the superego is more verbal than the id. Okay, so let me give some context in case you don't know what I do here. Um, so, my life goal mission is to encourage what I call recognition, critical recognition. Critical recognition is the basis for critical thinking as I see it. Um, so, really quickly, typically, I define critical thinking as like three things plus another thing. But yeah, anyway, so critical recognition, which I'm gonna define in a second, and then critical reflection, which is easier to understand. You already have that in your schema, sort of. Um, and that's, in order to be good at critical reflection, you have to, know which inferences are valid. You have to kind of take your time with your thinking, and you have to know what sort of inferences are invalid, what some logical fallacies are, etc. And the more of those things you know, the better you're going to be at critical reflection, formal logic, propositional logic, and so on. But yeah. Number three is critical research, which is basically the scientific method. To be good at critical research, you would have to be good at, testing a hypothesis, know some stuff about statistics, know how to evaluate a source, if you're doing like a literature review, stuff like that. And then number four, which is doesn't might not really fit in a critical thinking, but it's just part of the whole package, is critical resolution, the ability to discuss things. So for that, knowing about communication and framing and noise and blah blah blah. But let's go back to what underlines all of this. That's critical recognition, which I define as recognizing what the thinking system is: a biological, automatic, deterministic, evaluator, interpreter, pre-programmed by evolution, past experiences that have built up certain mechanisms. Anyway, the point is, not a very reliable thinking system, especially with things that where there wasn't a lot of survival pressure to be able to think about things. So if it's like, I don't know, figuring out whether there's a predator running towards you, pretty reliable. Still not super reliable. It might just be a black guy out for a jog, but still pretty reliable. But when it comes to voting for president, pretty unreliable. Research about competency and testosterone. Google psychology, research, voting, competence, face. Okay, but I don't know how much time we have, so I want to get into the other stuff. Oh, so part one is recognizing the fact that you are not an angel, that you are, this physical, fallible thing. Number two is knowing enough about your function, your tendencies, and common cognitive errors to have some chance of being able to recognize them when they happen. Now, of course, you don't have to know the names of them, right? But obviously, names are also really great for organizing and associating and categorizing and representing and so on. Okay. So, it is extremely valuable to have a name for each of these tendencies, confirmation bias, and then hundreds of other ones. But, you could probably get away with knowing a couple dozen. Let me include also in critical reflection Bayesian reasoning. But anyway, you can know a couple dozen, and that will help your thinking a lot. Might not help you get to the answer, but it will help you realize that you haven't gotten to an answer when you have the impression that you have. Oh, wait a minute, I got here by this heuristic. That heuristic is not super reliable. I don't actually have a reliable conclusion. Okay, great. Can you hear the TV? I'm wishing that I had put the microphone facing that way. That's all right. So, because my mission is to encourage recognition, because I think it'll lead to humility, better thinking, better self-monitoring, better, did I say better decisions? I did, right? I've been thinking a lot about, because to me it's fucking obvious, the advantage of a brain knowing about itself. Especially replacing its delusions, its illusions about itself with real shit about itself and finding out that it's real shit. So I've been thinking about reasons to be Creg. By the way, that's the adjective. Creg, C-R-E-G, for cognition. By the way, speaking of being a shit brain, I hadn't even realized that like when I first came up with Creg, I didn't realize that the word is not recognition. So I thought it was, I'm just taking C and then the first three letters of recognition. And I remember one day I was like, wait a minute. But I still really like it, Creg. Okay. So let's get into these three things, and I hope that they will be things that you remember, that you think back to, that, or even as you hear them, that you think are worth noting and reliving in the future. It just means keeping it bouncing around in here in the future, because if you integrate these things into your perspective on your own thinking, then you'll notice when you're doing these things and you'll recognize it. Great job. Okay. So I'm going to say what the three things are again. Not engaging with ajit, which is kind of basically motivated reasoning. So someone is trying to defend a conclusion, but is not actually saying the things that got them to that conclusion. They're saying other things. When you engage with those other things, you're wasting your time, bro. Instead, you should be looking for the actual things that got them to their conclusion. That's what you should be challenging or exploring. And they should be too, because they're probably not lying to you when they're giving all these irrelevant reasons for why they think blank is true or why they want blank, whatever. They don't realize that that's what they're doing. So, but if they trust you, then obviously less likely that you're going to ajit with people that you trust, but actually scratch that. I don't want, because we ajit with everybody. We all ajit all the time, bro. Okay, that's just how the system works. You need to defend something. You don't go and look at the records of how you got to that thing. You think of, well, what are some good defenses? But you don't really know what a good defense is. So it's really just like, what seems like a good defense? And then you give those things. We're going to explore that some more, but I want to define that quickly, but I also feel like I kind of just covered it. Anyway, number 2, we're going to get into the meat of this. Expectations. So we're compelled to do what's expected of us. And then also, we feel good about the things that we've done that other people feel good about us doing. We're going to explore that. And then number 3 is that the superego is, and of course this is shorthand. Superego kind of, well, I don't know, it's kind of meaningful. Is more verbal than the id. Okay, so let's go. Let's just knock out number 1. So if you're Creg, you know that the mind is really complicated, kind of segregated. Modular is a better word than segregated. It's a modular system. You also know that it's an evolved system, which for our evolution and for all species on Earth means that 1, it evolved according to what was advantageous for survival and reproduction, and 2, well, I guess maybe you can actually say this falls within 1, but I'm going to say 2 anyway. And 2, that what's advantageous for survival and reproduction is resource economy. So whenever there is a shortcut that's reliable enough, that's going to be preferred to the long way around, because that's going to be more energy consumptive, right? So let's give an example. Because if you ask someone to do something or refuse something that someone is offered, say because, and then you can basically say whatever you want. For instance, hey, can you close that door just because it's over there? Now that could actually be like a good reason, but I don't want to get bogged down in this. So in the original experiment in the 70s, Langer, no, I don't want to explain that. Google Langer, Langer. Ellen is her first name. Photocopier, or Xerox. So we evolved with this shortcut to just listen out for someone introducing a justification for their request. And then if they introduce a justification for their request, and in English that's by saying the word because, then let's go ahead and comply. If they don't introduce a reason, again in English by saying the word because, then let's not comply. That requires much less cognitive energy than if they give you a good reason for their request, then comply, because then you have to actually evaluate the reason. And if they don't give you a good reason, then don't comply. Okay. What was my point about that? How does that relate to item number 1 about not engaging with the premises of motivated reasoning, born of motivated reasoning? Well, I guess 1, because thinking on the spot of why whatever you just said 5 minutes ago is true or justified is, I kind of am guessing, is less energy consumptive than having recorded all the processes that led to what you said 5 minutes ago, and then recalling them. By the way, what is the ajit? I've referred to it as motivated reasoning. Well, how I like to think of it, it's the lawyers of the company. Okay? They don't really care about truth or whatever. They just care about stringing together convincing, persuasive sentences and making their case. Okay? So let's do an example. What inspired this today? Fuck. All right, let's use oh gosh, I want a simple example to come to me, but the two I've come up with are a bit too personal. I'm talking about someone else's family, and well, anyway, so my partner's parents, don't like me, and it isn't. We haven't interacted much. Um, it's the dreads. It's not graduating college, and it's driving Uber. So, um, if no, I'm gonna get bogged down in this. All right. Well, you know what? These videos, the videos I make on my channel, kind of require your participation. You can't just kind of passively receive the things that I'm saying. So, here's how you can participate to understand what I'm saying. Next time you are in a disagreement with somebody, take a beat when they're giving you their reasons. Let's say you find yourself getting frustrated. One, because the reasons that they're giving, like, don't seem real, or don't like make sense. And two, because you feel like you're playing whack-a-mole with their reasons. So next time you feel like, let's just focus on that one. Next time you feel like you're playing whack-a-mole with someone's defensive arguments, take a beat, go, oh, think I might be engaging with their ajit. I'm just talking to their lawyers. Maybe you can get them to take a beat, somehow get them to feel safe and say, hey, let's explore the real underpinnings of that thing. Maybe what all you're saying are the real underpinnings. I'm a little bit skeptical. So I just want to see if we can slow down and take a look at the other things, because it's going to be much better. I mean, it is of no value to you, pretty much, to be playing whack-a-mole with their ajits, because even when you show them how reason A is wrong, reason A isn't what actually brings them to X, their conclusion. So it has no effect on them maintaining X, right? But if you can find the SUSIT, which is the SU meaning underlying, SOUS, or under, and then it, the mechanism. If you can find the SUSIT of the conclusion and engage with that, you might actually make some progress. Let's skip to number 3 because I think I could talk about number 2 about expectations for a while. So number 1 we're gonna say is done. One advantage to being Creg is that you realize that we are this modular thinking system, and so there can be a department doing a thing and another department doing a thing. So there's one department that produced belief X, and then when you're discussing it, it's a whole nother department that's trying to defend belief X, right? And you have to be like, hold on, I actually want to talk to the initial people that made it up. Let me see if I can tease them out. And also, if you're Creg, you know that the person in front of you, the brain in front of you, doesn't really know what it's doing, isn't really aware of all of its processes, isn't very intentional, and so on, just like you, just like me. And so it's less confusing to us that, you know, there's this whole other module that's throwing this bullshit at us. And the overall company is endorsing it, believes in it, right? I mean, that's how we're wired. When the lawyers speak, everybody else shut the fuck up because they know what they're doing, right? I don't know if you've ever had to go to court. I had to go to court one time. And I remember I wanted so badly to tell the judge, like, the cops are lying. They deleted the video of what happened, and we haven't been able to recover it because it's the latest iOS, blah, 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 blah. Like, ask me what happened. I'll tell you what happened. And I'll also explain to you how it doesn't even make any sense what they're saying happened. Saying I fucking, with no alcohol, no drugs in my system, just decide to fucking to choke a police officer when they hadn't even done anything except ask me to stand by the police car, and they were running my name, and I have no warrants out. And the girl that I think they thought was underage was actually 6 months older than me, 25, and I was 24 or something. Why would I? What? Anyway, the point is that your lawyer's gonna tell you, shut the fuck up. So anyway, similarly, the mind is wired that way, where a lot of the mechanisms just step back when the lawyers get involved. And typically the lawyers get involved because the stakes are kind of high. Okay, hopefully otherwise, if I haven't, leave a comment and I'll try to more formally present that whole thing. Okay, so number 1 is done. Now, let's move on to number 3 now. Here's what's interesting. This is the first time I think this ever has occurred to me. And I think this is gonna really sing for you. I think, and if it doesn't, I feel like just within the next week, you're gonna notice this, either with yourself or with other people. So, I am of the camp that consciousness, rationality, which is not a binary thing that, you know, you either have or you don't have, but so what I mean is just like the top-notch cognitive systems of the mind, the ones that get the closest to rationality relative to the other mechanisms of the mind, or members, I was gonna say, and that's good. I should use that word more. What am I doing right now? What is this 3? Superego, egoid? No idea. Oh, no. Language, rationality, and consciousness, I think, are all related. I mean, they're all, like, our best mechanisms may have sort of evolved together. Okay, anyway. By the way, superego, so I'm not really using it in the original sense or in the actual sense as, you know, defined by the person who came up with it, Freud, which is more of just a self-monitor and a consciousness. I'm kind of using it as the highest self. But of course the self is the ego, but whatever. Okay, so here's what you've probably already noticed in your interactions, or maybe even by yourself, but that I definitely think you'll notice very soon if you haven't. People talk about themselves. No. people, all right, I'm thinking of someone in particular who will get annoyed about really like small things, or things where it's not really fair, justified to get annoyed about it, or not productive for them. But you'll never hear them sort of verbally acknowledge that they get annoyed by this little thing. Like if like you'll like they'll say, "Oh, I would never be annoyed by that." No, that doesn't make any sense. Why would I? By the way, I've mentioned this in videos. Why would I? That's an indication of the ajit. Because you're, first of all, like if you say to someone, "Can I tell you a secret? Promise not to tell anyone," and they go, "Who am I gonna tell?" For me, that's a red flag. Is that related to what I'm saying right now? I'm not sure. That's a red flag. Just like, tell me that you're not gonna tell anyone. It doesn't really fucking matter to me whether people who like are available to hear it or not, that you're close to or not. I don't really ask people to keep secrets. But I guess maybe I used to, because I feel like I haven't heard this in a while. Anyway, so whenever people say like, "Why would I?" It's, first of all, there seems to be an assumption that you're rational, as though you only do things that have good reasons. Sorry, sweetheart. Secondly, it's like, why are we playing this hypothetical game of, what are the potential reasons? Whatever. Let's just talk about the facts of whether or not you did this. Here's why I think you did this, not your motivation, but here's the evidence I have for that you did this. Now give me counter evidence or undermine the evidence that I gave you. Let's talk about facts, not circumstance, right? Well, what would be my motivation? Shut the fuck up. Tell me that there are facts supporting that you didn't do this, because whether or not it would be rational for you to do that has nothing to do with whether or not you did it. Okay, I just spent a long time on the why would I thing. What am I talking about right now? Superego is more verbal than the id. So yeah, and I'm sure I do this as well, but it's much easier to notice it in other people. So I'll like know people that I'll see in their behavior that they get annoyed about Q. But whenever I'm talking to them, it seems like their language system has no idea that they get annoyed about Q. I had someone tell me a story the other day about something that really annoyed them, and they kept saying, I mean, obviously it was fine, and it's not that annoyed me, but they had just been like, I can't believe they did this. And then it was like, I mean, it's not this that annoyed me. And there was like no other thing. So if you're Creg, then first of all, that you don't get annoyed for rational reasons. Like, it's the id that gets annoyed, the most primitive part, usually, right? It's not your highest rational self, typically, that gets annoyed by something. It's that more primitive, more closely linked to the amygdala, the emotions, the limbic system self that gets annoyed. So you shouldn't expect that you can justify every time you get annoyed, right? And so often we're like talking about being annoyed about something, we kind of hear ourselves go, that's not rational, and then conclude, well, I'm not annoyed about that. Oh no, I wouldn't ever be annoyed about that. Yes, you would. The part of you speaking now wouldn't be, but the overall system, or another part of the system that can grab the steering wheel, can definitely be annoyed. Maybe not the system that's at the microphone, but yes, the system driving the feelings, driving some of the behavior at a given moment can absolutely be annoyed about that. Let me give you what inspired this thought today. So I'm talking to my partner, Sarah. I'm gonna move in with her in a few months, and for Christmas, my parents are getting me or us an exercise bike, a Peloton, and I want the Peloton to be downstairs in the living area and the working area, not up in a bedroom. But every time that I like started to explain why I wanted it down there, I would have trouble. So my partner would say, for instance, when you get up in the morning, you can do it, or, if it's in the middle of the day and you want to do it, you can just run upstairs and hit the bike. And the rational part of me, quote unquote, or the most rational part of me, now I'm going to still put it in quotes, because to be rational would be to work with the information available. So the rational part of me that thinks the whole system is rational, though that doesn't need quotes. The rational part of me that thinks the whole system is rational is like, yeah, that makes sense. Let's keep it in a bedroom. But part of me is like, no. The part of me that's like, no, is the part of me that's actually more rational in this case, but not behaviorally, but it's more rational about itself. Anyway, I'm not going to do that. If it's 1 p.m. and I'm downstairs working on a video, and I could take a break and hop on the exercise bike, I'm not gonna walk upstairs and do that. One thing is that ADHD, for anybody, when you change spaces, there's kind of a little reset that happens, right? And you've probably even heard about this. And certainly you can start noticing it in your own behavior. It's why, you can walk into a room and just go, wait, whoa, what am I doing in here again? So anytime you go upstairs or walk through a doorway, there's a kind of reset that happens. And so if I'm working on something, I want to stay in that. Oh, by the way, and if you have ADHD, it's even more exaggerated. I want to stay in that. I don't want to change spaces. I don't want to go to another space and kind of disconnect from what I'm doing. And then also just the thought of going in another space, it just feels like, no, I'm comfortable here. I don't want to go in another space. I would rather walk to the other side of a convention hall if I can see the other side from my initial position than walk into the hallway outside. And by the way, I mean the main, you know what I'm trying to say, right? I don't mean, yeah, anyway. Walking to going to a place that you can see from where you are is going to have it's going to be less disruptive than even walking to a closer space that you can't see from where you are. Pretty sure that's true. But all of giving, so let's say that I didn't have a background in psychology or neuroscience, right? I would feel really, really silly. In fact, that's probably the only reason I was actually able to express those things. If I didn't, I'd feel really silly going, yeah, but nah, I don't want to keep it in another room. Yeah, I don't know what to tell you. That just shapes, and I don't think I would do it. I know I could, in some senses of the word, could. I know that if I were a rational angel, I would do that. I think the exercise bike should be in the main space. That would feel really like silly, right? So if you have ADHD or something, this is kind of could be a breakthrough for you understanding what I'm saying right now, what we're talking about right now. Um, because there are tons of times where you sort of, agree to do things because like a rational angel would be able to do that thing, but not you, bro. Especially not you, bro. So, yeah, and so trying to strengthen the verbality, the verbalism, the communication strength of your id, which is driving behavior. And by id, of course, I'm just talking about any mechanism that's older in our evolutionary history, that's that you would associate with the id as being more basic, primitive, whatever. These are, by the way, extremely strong mechanisms, right? And this is just in general a value of being Creg, is knowing that some of your strongest mechanisms are the ones that you would be, that like least match your ideals. That are, I mean, the most primitive, basic mechanisms tend to be the strongest and most resistant to change. Um, you have to know that, bro. It needs to be a part of your self view, bro. I think I finished number 3. So the point is that the things that are easier to say, the easiest things to express are often the least related to your strongest instincts. Of course, unless, and this can happen often. Often the what I'm calling the superego, which really isn't the superego. Let's use system 1 and system 2. System 1, which you can definitely associate with the id. The system 1 mechanisms are the hardest to change and the strongest. Often system 2 just buttresses. That's good. Buttress versus butcher. That's interesting. Okay, anyway. I mean, that could be like a good. Anyway, system 2 often just is like the lackey to system 1. Even though system 2 is supposed to be wiser and all this stuff, usually really because of resource economy, just uses its wisdom to bolster the system 1 thing, whatever system 1 came up with, right? To rationalize, right? So when that has happened, when system 2 has gone ahead and accepted whatever system 1 came up with, then of course what is verbally expressed might be very in line with what you with your strongest instinct, but not in line in the sense that that's why you have the strongest instinct. System 2 is going to come up with some wild ajits to justify the system 1 instinct. So for instance, let me give you an example. Okay, the endowment effect. Once you possess something, it becomes more valuable to you, right? So let's say you don't have these tickets to this baseball game. We ask you, how much are they worth? You say $100. Okay, because you evaluate. you satisfy whatever, $100. Okay, give me $100. Okay, now you have the tickets. Turns out you can't go. You know what? Let me buy those tickets. Then I'll buy those tickets back. Would you say they were worth $100? All right, I'll give you $100. And you're like, they're worth more than $100, bro. Now, that's because of the endowment effect. That's because you own it. But that's not the reason you're going to give. That's not the reason you're going to think. You're not going to experience that as the reason. You're not going to give that as the reason. Oh, sorry, bro. They're not worth $100 anymore. I own them now. So now they feel like they're worth $120. You're not going to say that, right? Instead, I think, I don't know. Sometimes it's, also, this is silly to try to say whether the ajit is system 2 or system 1. The department is made up of lawyers, paralegals, receptionists. Okay, anyway, so you're gonna give a reason, right? Like, oh, I need to make a profit. That like sounds rational. We are used to, you have to make a profit. Of course, you don't actually have to make a profit. There's not much that's happened here that you need to be compensated for. It would be perfectly rational to resell the tickets at the same value that you bought it for. Not if that's how you make your income, obviously, buying and reselling tickets. But in this particular instance, which is a particular instance, it's perfectly rational to sell them for 100. I mean, it's even rational to sell them for 50. You can't go, right? So anyway, I think I've explained how system 2 can sort of be on the same page, or the ajit can be on the same page as the actual initial instinct as far as like endorsing the conclusion, but is not going to give the same reasons as what led to the actual instinct. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? Oh man, my enunciation has probably been terrible in this video. So the takeaway from this number 3 about the superego, not the superego, but what I'm saying, the takeaway is that it's hard to articulate some of our strongest desires, and also that there are systems in place that sort of don't endorse or consider rational those strongest desires, and so will block, will hinder that articulation, because those systems of rationality just have more connections to the verbal system, so they can easily hijack anytime the id tries to express something. I think I've done the best I can explaining that. I mean, on the spot anyway. And then also without you asking me a question or telling me what isn't clear. I wanted to give you like a tip, like, in a certain, like, how to recognize that the superego has grabbed the mic and you have to try to give it back to the id. So first of all, if it feels hard to articulate a desire, then don't just say, oh no, that desire is wrong. I'm going to go with what's easy. And then you just go with what's easy to articulate. Don't do that. Go, okay, I may be having trouble because this desire that I have, which is driving my behavior, which is driving my emotions, doesn't sound rational. And so that's why the people at the microphone are like, we're not saying this shit. You know, the members at the microphone are like, we're not saying this shit. So spend time with it. You know, let the person you're talking to know, okay, this is gonna sound crazy, but I think it's important that I try to express this kind of weird expectation or whatever that I have. And then, of course, the more that... You know what a great example is? And I think I've talked about this previously in videos. I have noticed in my life, and you have too, maybe, that people don't tell you they're upset about something until they have a justification. And you'll see this with yourself. Someone will ask you, like, do you like that? And you may experience a dislike of it, but that doesn't really come out. You go, or like, do you think we should do this? I don't think we should do that. And then all of a sudden you think of a compelling reason why this thing is bad. And you immediately switch over from to, yeah, no, I don't think that's a good idea because bop, bop, bop. It kind of almost makes my stomach turn whenever I try to, like, I'm against something, I don't like something, and I try to force myself, give the microphone to the id, let the id say, I don't like that, even though I can't back it up. It feels gross. It feels weird. Now, I'm not trying to encourage that you ever stop there, just being like, I don't like that. Can't, give a reason why that thing is bad. Now let's just not do that. I mean, there are moments where definitely, you don't have to explain why you don't like this food, You don't have to explain why you don't feel like going to the pool, right? I guess we do have this expectation. Anyway, all that's really interesting, but it can it's starting to feel like a rabbit hole. And also, I'm thinking I want to move on to the expectations thing, because this is maybe my favorite one of the 3 points of how the value of being Creg, of knowing yourself, or and of course not from the inside, because we're not all that different, right? By the way, let me say something now that I've been thinking about. I often say in my videos that we're all basically the same, but of course we're also all quite different. So let me explain the nuances of this, because I think I've only recently kind of, had a way to explain it. We have basically all the same members. We have all the same mechanisms, basically. By and large, we have all the same mechanisms, okay? However, there are variations in the relative strengths of our mechanisms, right? So I have ABC, you have ABC. But my A is stronger than my B. Your A is weaker than your B. And your B is stronger than your C, your B is stronger than your C, and my B is about the same, a little weaker than my C. That's going to have a pretty big effect on how things play out, right? For me, I don't remember what I said. A is going to win against B, and for you, B is going to win against A. So different behaviors are going to result, different experiences, beliefs, interpretations, what have you. Another thing that accounts for our differences is sort of the permutations of how things can maybe play out. B is more sensitive for me. A is more sensitive in your case. So presented with the same situation, and it's a situation that could trigger A and could trigger B, B is going to be triggered first for me, A is going to be triggered first for you, right? And then that So then you immediately have two different causal chains. Me, it's then whatever B leads to, and for you, it's whatever A leads to, right? Sort of which avenue, which direction you go with the thing, okay? So our ultimate choices, beliefs, behaviors can be wildly different. But knowing, recognizing that we're kind of made up of the same ingredients gives us more opportunities for agreement. So when you say to me, blank because A, instead of going, no, blank because B, I can go, I also have A. And now that I'm kind of sitting with it, A is also a trigger for me. I do get that. I get that, the relevance of A. And if, I guess I get how, yeah, if A, then R, then V. Okay, I get where you're coming from. Kind of sounded like gibberish what I just said, but I think it. But then another part of me is like, no, 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 no. That's good. Where it came from a good place, even if you're like, what did I just say? You can trust yourself, Eris. No, I can't, but we will for that. Okay, okay, so then the second thing, and this is the final thing for the video, of the value of being Creg. I have to get out of this house. Because the things that I think that I'm good at and the things that I want to do are not the things that are encouraged by my father. They are not the things that are validated by my father. I'm Creg enough to know I'm not a rational angel, and so that matters. I'm Creg enough to admit, to understand that matters. By the way, part of being Creg, I've mentioned, is looking at evolution, right? What would make sense to have evolved? It doesn't make any sense to me. It makes sense that this exists in the gene pool, but not be super represented. It doesn't make any sense to me that it be a common trait of human beings to be immune to the expectations of their tribe mates. We are social creatures, somewhere between bees and, I did this before, and I couldn't think of what a super individualistic creature is. One that just lives and hunts alone. I can't think of, I know there are examples, but every example I'm thinking of, well, I'm picturing it as zoo surrounded by its own. I think that's what's undermining. All right, well, anyway. So we have tons of our mechanisms are just like kind of waiting for instruction and validation, right? Social proof is a really strong mechanism, not one that the verbal systems would want to admit to because it doesn't match our high ideals, but it is a real drive. What other people do is good, and what other people don't do is bad, and other people of our group. So I don't mean the other. So likewise, if you're Creg, you know that you're not immune to your parents' expectations. You're not just like this free will, independent, autonomous thing. Because of course it's advantageous for the next generation to do as instructed. by the ones with experience, with tested experience. Okay? Now, I'm not actually saying always listen to your parents, because a lot of their experience isn't really tested, or we're not very rational. Also, our environment is wildly different from what it was. It's a lot more complicated. So really, don't nobody know shit. Okay, for some reason I thought I heard someone driving the driveway. I wouldn't be able to hear that from here. It was just my hair. So when my father says to me, hey, you should do this with your life, you should, or this is valuable or whatever, that is playing a major role in my cognition. And it's undermining all my mechanisms that are like, this right here, right now, what I'm doing right now, this is what I want to do. I want to think about these things. I want to offer these things to you. I want to discuss these things with you, which we'll be able to do in the future when we start live streaming and we start having some real dialogue, me and you. But people can sometimes stay stuck in situations because they're like, no, I'm a rational angel. I can continue to like live here, and I'm just gonna keep trying to ignore what my father is saying. That's not very Creg, bro. There are only some mechanisms that can even try that. And those mechanisms will lose out against those more primitive, older, stronger, harder to change mechanisms that are why we exist. This generation exists because its ancestors survived as a tribe. And to survive as a tribe, you do what you're fucking told by the people who have been here longer. You fill the role that's fucking assigned to you. Okay? So, the flip side of this, is that right? It makes sense in my head, the flip side of this. The flip side of this is, and also we can see why we would have evolved this way. I might be able to finish this in an hour, wow. I mean, so I only have 2.5 minutes, so let's not talk about that. So the flip side is that, and we can see why we would have evolved this way, is that if people are valuing your work, you're going to be motivated to keep doing that. And if people aren't validating what you're doing, you're going to feel thirsty for validation, feel unaccomplished, and feel motivated to do the thing that would get validation. So the reason I'm even making this video is because I was just on the phone with my girlfriend, and we first talked about number one, or she inspired number one because she was having a conversation with someone and was really engaging with their ajits. And it seemed obvious to me that the things that she was like, that doesn't make any sense, and blah, blah, were not the real reasons they believed the thing she was disagreeing with. Right? So I was like, I was thinking in my head, I didn't say this in this conversation, but it'd be much more valuable for her to figure out what are the actual underpinnings of the thing, the Susits. The other thing was that we were talking about the Peloton, and I was having trouble being like, yeah, I think it should be in the common space, because every time I was sort of forecasting my behavior, realistically, when the id was forecasting what it would do, it knew I wouldn't be going upstairs. But then every time it tried to express that, the rational angel thinking of themselves systems jumped in and said, oh, that doesn't make any sense. So we have free will. We can absolutely just go in another room and exercise and then come back. So then they kept blocking the id expressing, okay? And then this last thing, and this is, as I told her, I think this could be a really useful breakthrough for her. I told her this. her, and for her and her sister, their parents don't value creativity, travel, language learning. Their parents value getting a 9 to 5 that earns money, and then next year, if you need to change 9 to 5s, it doesn't have to be next year, but and then in the next whatever, get a higher salary and then a higher salary, right? Well, neither of their daughters is doing that. Um, both of their daughters are pretty unhappy, even though, especially my partner, she's accomplished things. But she has like low self esteem because she doesn't feel like she's accomplished things. Because the people she looks at to validate her accomplishments are not validating her accomplishments, and are instead sharing expectations that she is not fulfilling. Their main expectations of like making more and more money. She's not fulfilling those. And the expectations imposed on us by parents, other authorities, and like romantic partners, for instance, those are what we're kind of calibrated for. So the fact that she did graduate school in journalism, the fact that she got into this like exclusive writing, this publication thing, those aren't boosting her self-esteem, because those are not, I mean, I guess I'm just repeating myself now, but those are not the things being validated by the people that we're programmed to look to for validation, to know whether we've accomplished something. So the same thing here, right? With my dad, every time we have an interaction that has anything to do with my work, or even sort of tangentially, where he's, hey, you should do this job. Well, what I'm hearing is I shouldn't be doing the job I'm doing, that it's not constructive, productive, valuable. Oh, you should do this other thing. What's my point? Is that really just deflates me, right? I could feel really good about all the words and concepts that I invented, and like, because I think it's really practical stuff, and I have yet to really feel like this is confirmed, or maybe I would feel like this is confirmed from all the times I've gone to conferences and talked to other attendees, and they've been like, wow, the few people that I have shared these things with. So me and my partner, this is the first time I am talking to someone and able to use my vocabulary, right? Ajit, Suzit, liver. And what else? I mean, there's like 200, this is like 300 words, brother. And, associated concepts. I could feel really good about that. That could motivate me to like work harder and work better, because confidence always helps you work better. Arrogance doesn't, but confidence and faith do. There's a fine line. Arrogance can. To make the claims I'm making about arrogance and confidence and working better, I'd have to be more nuanced, but we don't have time for that, because we are trying to be as close to 1 hour as possible. So we're trying to finish up right now. Anyway, so I think we're done, actually. There's some value of being Creg. For this last one, surround yourself with people who want you to be doing the things that you want to be doing. Get away from. And that can just mean not talking about it. It doesn't have to actually mean not interacting with people who validate or who expect you to do things that you don't want to do. Like, who expect you to do certain things and those certain things are things that you don't happen to be things that you don't want to do, or who, yeah, validate things that you aren't doing, because then you're just gonna go, oh, you know, if you're Craig. Now, if you think you're a rational angel, you're just not gonna be able to understand what I'm saying. You're just gonna be like, no, not me. Anyway, I think I've made my point, right? Yeah, surround yourself with people that are going to impose expectations that you want imposed on you, and that are going to validate things that you want validated. Okay, great. That's one sentence for that last thing, which is number 2 in my list. Let's do one sentence for number 3. Your desires, mechanisms, interpretations, beliefs, whatever, don't all have equal access to speech. Your higher ideals, what you think you should do, what you think would be rational, would be justified, is overrepresented in your speech. Sometimes you have to like put real effort into balancing that out a bit, because the people around you and you yourself, they need to hear you, and you need to articulate those inner instincts and needs and desires, even if they don't match our higher ideals, and don't sound rational. That probably wasn't one sentence, but I bet with some clever punctuation you could make it so. And then number 1, and yeah, again, these 2 things definitely relate. Number 1, and then the thing we were just talking about. But number 1, don't take for granted that the reason someone gives, and they're not lying, they really believe that the reasons they're giving are the reasons for the thing. But don't assume that to be the case. In fact, assume that to not be the case, because they're 2 different departments. The department that like produces a belief is not the same department that defends it. So I would say more often than not, would I say that? Well, I am saying that actually, yeah. More often than not, if the justification someone gives is the same as this justification someone gives for their belief is the same as the reason they believe it, that's a coincidence. Or there's some confound to explain it. But it's not because there's some system for literally justifying a belief by giving the reasons that one arrived at the belief. I really like this video. I really like the things that I've expressed and kind of like how I've expressed them. Please check me. Tell me, first of all, talk to ChatGPT about what I said. Think about what I said. Talk to your friends about what I said, and check it in that sense, especially if your friends have a background in have real psych knowledge. I said. And then also, what did I mean by check me? Oh yeah, let me know. Yo, here's why that was gibberish. Don't just let me know that it was gibberish, because I'm so sensitive that even if I have no reason to spend a bunch of time questioning myself, I will. Actually, go ahead. I need the practice, actually. Gosh, I don't know how I'm gonna possibly have a bunch of people on my channel. I'm hoping my partner, she'll start a channel, and then with my help, we can support ourselves with that channel, because I just feel like I'm not going to be able to get any real work done if I've got tons of people giving me feedback. Because in my head, I'm not good at filtering which feedback I should listen to. We'll see what happens. I'll try it out maybe. Have a few million followers, see how I like it, and then just shut shit down, go private or something if it's not working out. And of course, you should absolutely be laughing at me. I am making a joke as though it's easy to just like accidentally have millions of followers or something, that I wouldn't have to, or that it's even, in my future. I definitely don't want millions. But can't I make money with just like having like 10,000 followers with some good views or something? Also, I could have a moderation system, right? Where it's like, yeah, if someone sort of justifies, or I could just never look at comments, and like my partner or someone we hire or something sifts through the comments and finds the ones that are going to be valuable to me, gives me some that are encouraging and others that like I can learn from and I can adjust, because I definitely don't want to just keep espousing stuff while people are trying to tell me I'm wrong and I could be learning from that and I'm not. That's the worst nightmare. A worst nightmare. The other one is people, the whole world thinking that I'm evil. Okay. Done.